Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show that digs into complex source material, pulling out those fascinating insights, making them clear, and hopefully really engaging. Today, we're taking a journey, a real deep dive, into some incredible commentaries on Surah Al-Bayyinah. Our goal? Well, it's to unpack the layers of meaning in its verses, understand the history behind them, and see how this ancient wisdom, still speaks to us today.
Absolutely. And this surah, it's significant, sometimes called Al-Qaima, the upright, or even Lam yakuni ladina kafaru. Just from its first few words, it was revealed in Medina, and it really focuses on the people of the book, the Alum Kitab, so Jews and Christians primarily, and also the polytheists, the mushrikin. It zooms right in on how they reacted to the message.
Okay, so let's jump straight into that, the very first verse. Lam yakuni ladina kafaru min ali kitabi wal musirikina munfakina hata tatyahunul bayina. Our sources flag that word munfakina right away. Apparently, it's one of the most difficult words to really pin down in the whole Quran. Leads to some really rich interpretations. What's the story there?
Well, the difficulty, it stems from the root word, infaqa. It has these shades of meaning, like detaching, releasing, even being forsaken or abandoned. And it's this very ambiguity, really, that opens the door to two quite profound, almost contrasting ways of understanding it. Both shed light on the human condition. So the first interpretation suggests that the Alu Kitab, especially the Jewish tribes in Medina, were just unwavering in their existing beliefs. They absolutely knew a prophet was on the way. The sources even say they'd tell the local Arabs, wait till our prophet comes, he'll lead us to victory. But despite expecting him, they weren't going to detach, there's that word again, from their own religious ways, until the clear proof, the Al-Bayyinah, showed up. Something that would undeniably prove this new way was superior to their old way.
All right, so they're holding tight, waiting for this absolute undeniable sign, almost challenging it to appear because they were so sure of themselves. What does that suggest about maybe spiritual readiness or lack thereof?
Yeah, it points to that human tendency, doesn't it? Clinging to what's familiar, even when you're expecting something new. A kind of spiritual inertia, like show me something completely irrefutable before I even consider shifting my ground.
Yeah.
But then there's a second interpretation of munfakina, and this one, it goes even deeper. It suggests a state of being forsaken or left by God. It paints a picture of that era, the 5th, 6th centuries, as just a time of deep, deep corruption globally. Moral decay, humanity seemed lost, incapable of fixing itself.
Wow, so in that view, it wasn't just resistance, it was inability. And Allah's sending of a prophet was this act of immense compassion, making it possible for people to leave that state. Because otherwise, they were stuck.
Exactly. Without that divine rescue mission, without the Al-Bayyinah, humanity was essentially forsaken, couldn't climb out of that spiritual pit on its own. So the insight there is pretty profound. The surah starts by challenging us. Are we just resistant until proof hits us over the head? Or are we fundamentally unable to change course without God's help? It forces a look inward at our own inertia.
That is a really powerful starting point. Hits close to home, not just about ancient history. Okay, so this need for a clear sign, it leads us right to the core idea. What is this Al-Bayyinah, this clear proof? Our sources actually make it quite specific.
They do indeed. The clear proof is Prophet Muhammad himself, peace be upon him. His very existence, his life, was the evidence. Think about his background, which the commentaries really emphasize. An orphan, poor, couldn't read or write, and yet he becomes the most influential person in history, unites tribes, establishes this enduring spiritual and social framework. I mean, this transformation, it just defied all worldly logic. It presented it as clear proof of divine orchestration. There's that quote from Annie Besant, who wrote something like, it's impossible to study Muhammad's life and just admire him. You have to be convinced he was divinely chosen. His life story just didn't fit normal explanations.
So his life itself was a living miracle, a proof. But the Al-Bayyinah isn't only him, right? It's also the message he brought.
Absolutely. The sources clarify that the prophet recited Suf Mutahara, purified the scrolls. Right. That's the Quran. And purified here means, well, three things. Beautiful in its language, true in its content, and good in its effect. But the really crucial part, and our sources hammer this home, is its divine preservation. This is key. Unlike earlier scriptures, like the Torah and Injil, which were entrusted to human communities to preserve and, well, distortions happen, things added, things left out. The Quran, the sources state clearly, is preserved by Allah himself. They say something like, to this day, if even one letter is changed, Muslims will know. It's unique in that way. And that connects to it also being called Kutubun Qayyimah.
Kutub Qayyimah. Okay, so kutub here isn't just books in the physical sense. It's more like perfect ordinances or straight writings, the unchanging, just upright laws within the Quran, the ones that sort of establish and rectify things, bringing balance, the benchmark.
Precisely. It's about the straight, noble principles, the commands, the truths inside the Quran. They guide people to a righteous path, free from any crookedness or distortion. They establish an upright life in every sense.
Okay, this clear proof of the prophet, the Quran, it leads us right into a really interesting historical situation, what our sources detail quite a bit, especially with the Ahlul Kitab, the Jewish communities in Medina, what was going on there.
Right, so historically, these communities had moved to Medina, not because they knew the prophet would be from Medina necessarily, but because the city matched descriptions in their prophecies about where a future prophet might appear. Things like having lots of palm groves. Their hope, their deep expectation, was that this prophet would be one of them, a descendant of Isaac, and that he'd lead them to finally triumph over the local Arab tribes. But here's the fascinating and kind of sad part. The Ahlul Kitab, they recognized Prophet Muhammad when he came. They knew him. Their own scriptures, the Torah and Injil, described his characteristics, even mentioned his name Ahmad. The Quran says they knew him like they knew their own sons. It was that clear.
So they had this internal confirmation from their own books, like this is the guy we've been waiting for. If they knew, why did things go sour? Why the rejection later?
That's the crucial turning point, according to the sources. They didn't actually dispute his truth at first. The problem started after the clear proof arrived. Once he was there, and they realized he wasn't from their lineage. He was from Quraysh, different tribe. Sometimes rivals, that initial anticipation just curdled into envy, malice. The Quran describes it as hazadan min anfusihim, envy right from their own souls. It was this envy, this tribalism, not a genuine issue with the truth itself, that led them to split. Some believed, sure, but others disbelieved entirely, and some tried to have it both ways, saying maybe he's a prophet, but just for the Arabs, not for us.
Wow, that's a serious cautionary tale. A reminder that even crystal clear truth can be rejected because of personal feelings, grudges, tribal stuff. It can override everything else.
It really is. A profound warning for everyone, really. We're warned not to be like them, splitting up after the truth is made clear. The sources bring up that important hadith, the saying of the prophet, about how the Muslim community itself would eventually split into 73 factions, and only one would be saved. And when asked who they were, he said those who stick to his path and the path of his companions. It just highlights the danger of letting our biases or group loyalties get in the way of clear guidance.
Okay, so this all kind of funnels down to the core message, right? After laying out the proof and the human reactions, the Surah tells us what really matters. What are those fundamental commands?
Exactly. It leads straight into Ayah 5, which basically sums up the core message of all divine religions. They weren't commanded anything except this: worship Allah sincerely. That's mukhlisin lahudan. Purely for him, no partners, no ulterior motives. And part of that is being hunafa, inclining towards pure monotheism, turning away from all the crooked paths, all the polytheism deviation, towards the straight truth.
And
then beyond just belief, the actions. Establish the prayer that's the direct line to God, and give the charity, the zakat, that's the connection to humanity. These two are presented as absolutely fundamental. One source even says there's no good in a religion without prayer.
that idea of ikhlas, sincerity, it sounds so central, so profound, but also incredibly hard to actually achieve and keep up. It's not just doing the right thing, it's the why behind it. It's absolutely the peak. Ikhlas means that constant effort to purify your intention, cleaning out all the impurities, the hidden agendas, so you're doing it only for Allah's sake. Surah Al-Ikhlas itself is named that because it purifies the very concept of God. And the sources really stress how difficult it is. There's the saying, quite stark. All humanity is doomed except those who know. All who know are doomed except those who act. All who act are doomed except the sincere, quote. And even the sincere are still in danger. Why? Because you might lose that sincerity halfway through an act, or maybe after, when people praise you and your ego puffs up. True ikhlas is described as this deep secret between you and God. So secret, apparently, that even the recording angels or Satan don't fully grasp it, so they can't write it down perfectly or corrupt it.
Wow. So it's not like a switch you flip, but a constant ongoing process, a purification effort. How does someone even start cultivating that day to day? It's definitely a journey, not a destination. A lifelong vigilance, checking your heart constantly, before you act, during, after. Why am I doing this? Really? Is it for God? Or for show? Or some benefit? And remember, the sources link it to the other condition for accepted worship, following the prophet's way.
Oh?
You need both. Sincerity in your heart and correctness in your action, following the guidance. They go hand in hand.
Okay. And finally, the sources draw this really stark contrast. No punches pulled about the ultimate outcomes based on these choices. It's presented as quite black and white.
It is very clear. The disbelievers, both the Alul Kitab, who rejected the final proof, and the Mushrikin, they're given this title, Siyarul Baraya, the worst of creation. And their destination is hell, specifically Jahannam, described as deep and dark, signifying how serious their rejection was. And it's not arbitrary. It's because of deliberate disbelief, shirk associating partners with God and rejecting these core acts of worship, even when the evidence was clear. The Quran uses some really strong language elsewhere, calling such people worse than cattle or deaf, dumb, and blind to the truth, even if their physical senses work. Their failure to use their minds and hearts to grasp truth makes them spiritually less than rational.
A heavy designation. And on the other side, for those who embrace the truth and live by these principles.
A complete contrast. Those who believe and do righteous deeds, they are Khairul Baraya, the best of creation, their reward. Eternal gardens of Eden, a state where Allah is pleased with them, and importantly, they are pleased with Allah, complete contentment. And the key quality, the hallmark of those who reach this state, is identified as Khashiyah Rabbah. It's often translated as fear of God, but it's deeper than just being scared. It's a fear, or maybe an awe, a reverence that comes from knowledge, from truly understanding God's majesty, His wisdom, His justice. This deep understanding then shapes their actions, making them strive to please Him.
You know, what's really thought-provoking here, our sources point out the sad irony. Sometimes those who should be the best of creation end up imitating the behaviors and styles of the worst of creation. Which poses a question for you, the listener, doesn't it? If you genuinely aspire to be among the best, why would you ever model yourself after those described in such stark terms as the worst?
Yes, the sources directly pose that challenge. Why would believers, aiming for the highest rank, copy the manners, styles, ethics of those described as worst of creatures, those spiritually deaf, dumb, and blind? It's a real call to self-examination. Look at your choices, your influences. It stresses again the need for knowledge, seeking knowledge to cultivate that khashiyah, that insightful reverence for God, which guides us to align our lives with ultimate truth.
This journey into Surah al-Bayyinah, it really has unearthed some profound stuff. From decoding a single word to these ultimate categories of humanity, it's just such a powerful reminder about the clarity of truth and our choice in facing it.
Absolutely. The message really boils down to this. True devotion is about sincere intention, ikhlas, and righteous action, following guidance, ittiba. Both driven by knowledge. It's a constant effort, purifying why we do things, sticking to the path, and crucially, not letting things like envy or tribalism block us from accepting clear truth when it comes.
So for you listening, here's the final thought to take away. If the highest honor is being counted among Khairul Baraya, the best of creation, how does really understanding ikhlas, that deep internal sincerity, and khashiyah rabbah, that knowledge-based awe of God, how does that challenge you right now to refine your own actions, your intentions, making sure they're genuinely aimed at the ultimate truth? Something to think about. Until our next deep dive, keep digging for those nuggets of knowledge.